Well, welcome to the STONED Roadie podcast. It's the one you don't want to miss. It stars Greg Reed, the STONED Roadie, and Griff, the rocket scientist. Let's not forget Kathy Godsey and all the old friends come along. Lord Willie talking Skinner and leaving you with a song.
Podcast 76. Hello and welcome again to the 76th edition of the STONED Roadie Show. And I'm the world's most famous roadie, the STONED Roadie, Craig Reed. And this is my co-host, the rocket scientist, Griff Martin. And I'm just going to take a couple minutes here to explain to you how I got to be the world's most famous roadie in the whole world ever. And I'll tell you why, because I'm self-proclaimed. I just kind of nominated myself to hold that title. And I even gave myself a document of authenticity to prove it. And I got 12 qualifications here, that the reasons why I think I qualified, you know. And when I did this, I did it on my birthday last year, February 2nd, 2022. And I did it, and you know what? I've kind of felt weird doing it, because I never considered myself to be a technician. So roadies want to call themselves these days. I was always just a roadie, the STONED Roadie, and for me to call myself the most famous roadie ever was quite a stretch for me. But it wasn't my idea. I kind of got it off of FakeBook. You know, I was on there and people kept telling me they wanted me to write a book and that I was famous and I was the most, I was like a band member and I should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I kind of have a connection to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because they used they premiered Freebird the movie, great movie, at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then they used my film at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when they inducted Lynyrd Skynyrd in 2006. So I got a little rapport with them up there. So I went up there and I told everybody I was going to pitch the idea of inducting roadies up there into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, famous roadies, but they're just not into that idea at all. So I just, like I said, I just inducted myself as the world's most famous roadie, and it's so far it's non-contested. So anybody, it's an open invitation, and anybody wants to, challenge me for that title. It's an open invitation, but I haven't had any takers yet. I had Pops on here, and Pops, he was one of the best podcasts we've had on here so far, and he's actually what was a real professional roadie, and was actually Roadie of the Year a few years back, and he kind of admired my past, with Lynyrd Skynyrd, and the only reason I can think of why people have kind of crowned me with that title is because the only reason is because I worked for Lynyrd Skynyrd, and it's kind of like, that they're legendary, and I guess, the fact that I was kind of, I was only a roadie, but I was kind of like a band member, really. I was as close to being a band member as any person could be, as far as being affiliated with a band. I mean, I was right there with them the whole thing. But I'm not saying I was never in the band or anything like that. But I was pretty close to all those guys, and I'm the closest thing that could probably be to being in the band without being a band member. But But yeah, not enough jibber jabber about that subject. That's how I became the most famous roadie in the world, the Stoned Roadie. And what, Griff, what do we got going on besides that?
Well, Craig, let me just add to that Stoned Roadie thing there. You were a little bit of a stage act, I think. You caught Ronnie's microphone stand and Gary's slide. And it's not too many people that can say they had a rock and roll song written with them in it. And you're one of them. And not too many people living from a plane crash with a major rock and roll band. So that's why nobody's coming against you, I think, But yeah, hey, I think I got my microphone finally fixed. It was atrocious on the last podcast. And the whole interview with Benjamin Scott was the microphone being screwed up. And it's it's this little cord right here, that little cord right there. And I was waiting on it to come in from Amazon, and finally got it yesterday. So
not the XLR connection, it's the USB connection.
Yeah, it's a micro USB, and I couldn't find one anywhere. Finally, I needed a long one. There's a bunch of short ones out there, but I needed a long one. So anyway, so that's what was wrong with the microphone. It was the cord. And when you we're going to play the Bon Scott interview today when we get done with our jibber jabber, and you're going to see that he's got a major echo issue going on, and my microphone's all jacked up. And you sound great, Craig, but we sound like shit. So you guys are going to have to kind of turn up your volume and listen a little harder. And we apologize for that, but not really anything we can do about it. So yeah, you are going to hear that interview. And, a lot of times, I mean, people call me a rocket scientist, but I'm just as big as an idiot as anybody else. This cord right here, it took me a while to figure out what that was. And then when I went out to Gillsburg and I went to video those guys there at the monument, and Dwayne Easley had to show me how to work my flash card in my camera. I had this flash card right here, and I put it in, and there's a card in the card that goes in the card, and I didn't know that went in there because I've got one that doesn't go in there. And Dwayne said, "What's wrong with your camera?" And I said, "I don't know. I can't figure it out." And he goes, "Oh, well, you need to put a little card in that card." So the old Southern country boy had to tell the rocket scientist what the hell he was doing. So thanks for that, Dwayne, because if it wouldn't have been for him, I wouldn't have been able to shoot that great footage last podcast on the road with Griff Martin, because I bought a new flash card that had a card in the card. So that was a story on that. Then there were some other people that were asking me about these helmets back here. I keep them up here because that top one is a North Vietnamese Army pith helmet, and that represents communism. And then this one is a Nazi helmet. That's socialism. And then this is your MAGA Trump hat, which is freedom. That's what we want. That one right there. So that's my political rant for the day. So that being said, we can talk a little bit about, Craig, about the Benjamin Scott thing. Big controversy on this guy here, man. I don't know if you guys been following it on Facebook, but he claims that he's Bon Scott's son. And then there's probably about 10 people that claim that he's not. And some of these people actually hate the guy's guts. I mean, they literally hate his guts. I mean, he's got them so pissed off. And the only thing I can say is that either he is Bon Scott's son, or he really thinks he's Bon Scott's son, or he is a delusional liar. So you guys have to pick one of those three, because I don't think there's anything else in there that. And he's got a sister who claims that he's delusional. Her name's Janet, and she's been messaging me, and she writes to me. Because I mentioned so many people hated him. She said, "Hate is a strong word. Do I hate him for what he has done and says about our mother?" She calls our mom. She says she really feels sorry for the Scott family. Says he ain't heavy. He's my brother. If only he would use his imagination that he has for storytelling, he could make a fortune. And the next Steven Spielberg movie. But she, I think she cares about her brother. But, Craig and I, we report, you decide. Don't hate us, right, Craig?
Well, I kind of can relate to saying you are somebody and people saying you're full of shit, and so can my son Chad. Chad had to quit talking about, me working with Lynyrd Skynyrd and him, knowing all the Lynyrd Skynyrd guys, because at one time he got in trouble at school and they called him a liar, and the teacher or the principal of the school called the home and said that Chad was a big liar, that he was said his dad worked for Lynyrd Skynyrd, and said, well, yeah, so he does, so what, so that was kind of comical, so yeah. Sometimes that happens, but yeah, we interviewed him, and he sounds believable. I mean, I can't say here nor there. I mean, my first thing was, go get a DNA test and prove it, and he says he has got a DNA test, and the Scott family won't submit, and that's kind of odd that they won't, but I don't know. It's like Griff said, it's up for you to decide, but there sure is a lot of people that hate this guy.
Yeah, he says that his father, Bon Scott, was actually murdered, and he claims to be the last person to see him alive. Well, actually, he was told, I think, by somebody that he thinks that he was the last person to see him alive, and and the guy, I mean, I think he, my opinion, I think he really believes he's Bon Scott's son. I just think he does. I mean, I've seen a lot of liars in my life, and I've noticed body language and things like that. And being a great liar myself, I think that the guy is probably really in belief that Bon Scott's his father. I don't know how it came about that, but there's so many people though that are trying to shut him up, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff on my Facebook page. If you're friends with me on Facebook, I still have plenty of room on my page. I keep it weeded out, so if somebody wants to throw me a request to Griff Martin, you can come on there and I'll let you read them. But yeah, it's sad that what he's going through. I kind of feel bad for him.
Yeah, they have a Bon Scott festival in Australia, and I guess he actually got death threats if he was going to show up. That he actually got death threats, and Benjamin, he sent me an interview of he's been interviewed by quite a few people, and there's quite a few people that after they interview him, they kind of believe him. And I heard a couple of interviews, that the guy was talking about, and there's another guy that his name escapes me right now. I can't.
Was it Dave Stevens?
Dave Stevens, yeah, and he also claims that he's Bon Scott's son, and and there's a rumor about Bon Scott going into the hospital for two children, and but Benjamin said that he actually ran around with his father when he was young, and some people remember him. So
Yeah, he said that he remembers, there's some
Arnold
stories.
Schwarzenegger
Yeah,
was.
Ozzy Osbourne, is another one. Yeah, so uh, yeah, you have to listen to the interview. There's a lot in there. It's kind of hard to hear, but there's a lot in there, and
Yeah, he's very hard to understand.
yeah, he's got a thick.
Standing in that stairway or wherever he was very
He's got a thick accent, and then the echo. I don't know if he was in a stairway or a bathroom or whatever, but you can make it out. Just got to listen a little harder. But it's it's believable. I mean, Craig and I were like, well, the guy's pretty believable. But we're not going to say one or the other.
Well, I had a guy told me that I was an idiot for even talking to the guy.
Yeah. Oh God, I've almost had death threats. I mean, there's people sending me messages saying you need to keep him off of there, and I'm like, wow.
It sure is a controversial subject, though. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I had to get my pistol out and put it on the nightstand. I mean, I don't know what's going on here. The
only thing is that I don't remember Ronnie taking off, being missing for 3 days and taking off going to the Bahamas. That's not in my memory bank, so.
Yeah, and there was another guy on Facebook, and he was talking about how the time frame with Ozzy Osbourne and him hanging around with Bon Scott doesn't jive either. And then there's people saying that Bon didn't have any kids. It kind of emulates Lynyrd Skynyrd in a lot of ways because there's a lot of radical fans. There's like,
I guess Bon had a pretty good criminal record.
Yeah, he did, and he was a lot like Ronnie in a lot of ways. He was he was an obnoxious drinker, and it's a great story though that he.
Yeah, you can't go traveling around the countries if you're a felon. Yeah, even Canada. If you have a domestic violence or anything against you, can't get into Canada.
Yeah, so we'll have to. I don't know if somebody wants to debate this guy. That might be something we could do. Do a little debate with him. We'll see. We'll see where this goes. If somebody wants to debate him, one of you guys that hates him so much, send me a message and say, hey, I'll debate him, and then I'll ask him, and we'll get him on here and let you guys go at it. The Lynyrd Skynyrd way. Like Alan Collin with the boxing gloves.
This is supposed to be, like a Lynyrd Skynyrd type of a fan-based web type podcast thing, but Lynyrd Skynyrd and AC/DC had quite a bit in common. I mean, AC/DC, I don't care who you talk to in the rock and roll industry. AC/DC was an in-your-face rock band. I mean, there's no band out there that would want to headline over AC/DC. It's just because they're just, for however long they play, they're just in your face. So yeah, this is kind of interesting. Bon Scott had that belt, that Lynyrd Skynyrd belt buckle on, and there's a controversy of how he got that and stuff. So they're kind of tied together. But I did have some guy, last week I heard some guy say, you guys quit talking about the airplane and get back to talking about Lynyrd Skynyrd and quit talking about that plane crash, and tell Craig to quit singing because he can't sing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you gotta cover everything. The plane crash. We were kind of on that topic because Craig is going there in October, and I've been going up there and working with those guys trying to get set up so Craig can go out to the crash site, and that's why we're doing a lot on that. So we're almost done with that part. But Lynyrd Skynyrd and AC/DC, Craig, you drank with Bon Scott, right?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah. Well, like I said before, I don't remember a lot about that night. It was just, I wasn't impressed being around all those people. I mean, like the first person I met when I got into that kind of scene was John Lennon. So kind of like after that, anybody you meet kind of like not on that level.
Right.
So I mean, there was so many important people and famous people that I met. That Bon Scott was one of them, and I've sat and drank with hundreds of rock stars. I mean, that's no big deal. But yeah, we had a little drinking situation one night, me and Bon did, but like I said, I just don't remember a whole lot about it. That's probably one of the nights I was caught peeing in the planter in the hallway.
He may have told you about his illegitimate son and you didn't remember. He probably told you all about it.
There was some of his crew guys were hanging around too, down the bar. They were in and out and stuff. It was just one of them nights.
Well, I've seen AC/DC in concert before, and I've seen Lynyrd Skynyrd in concert, the old Lynyrd Skynyrd in concert, and I'd have to say those two together would be one hell of a concert.
Oh man, yeah, it was, yeah.
And Benjamin was talking about even that and you listened to the interview, he had mentioned something about that AC/DC was supposed to be on the plane when it crashed, and Craig said no, that wasn't going to happen. That plane wasn't big enough for two bands. No. Yeah, so
but Leon was kind of could have been their bass player. The AC/DC wanted Leon to come on.
Yeah, but he was under the Lynyrd Skynyrd contract, and Joe Crimp said that he actually was gonna make an agreement to that, and I think Joe asked him, man, you better check your contract, and found out he couldn't do it. So
there were several bands that were really liked the way Leon played bass. I know I was down in Jacksonville, Jefferson Starship come down there one time and had Leon fill in playing bass, and I went there and was Leon's guitar roadie for that gig. It was pretty cool.
I see. There's one of those things right there where I've never heard that story before, and Craig just burped it out. Nobody's ever heard that story before, Craig. That's another one of those.
Leon sat in for Jefferson, played bass with Jefferson Starship down in Jacksonville. That was pretty cool.
Wow, cool. So you've probably got a million more of those stories in your head, and it's up to me to crack them out somehow. I got to figure out how to get.
They're in there buzzing around, yeah.
Well, we could keep jibber jabbering, or we could just go ahead and cut right to the interview. What do you want to do, Craig?
Yeah, let's just go ahead and get on to Benjamin Scott and let people decide for themselves about Benjamin.
Yeah, and next week, sometime next week, we're going to do a little podcast on the event that we've got coming up here in July 29th, Rockin' for a Reason. It's going to be a lot like that Whitey's deal, and there's going to be some survivors from the plane crash there. We're trying to get Leslie Hawkins there. I think we got Derek Hess. Slicks and Revolver is going to be playing there. Bobby Sanders, a great flat top acoustic player, is going to be there. Mike Owings, he's going to be there with his band. We know we had Mike on before, right? He was the guy that lived with Alan and used to be in that band that Craig said didn't exist. Remember when he said he played with
he was a guitar player in the Alan Collins band.
Craig said, no, you weren't. but yeah, so he's going to be, and he's a phenomenal guitar player too, man. So yeah, and there's going to be a lot of people jumping in up there, and doing kind of like we did at Whitey's, and it's going to be some food, some VIP tickets. So we're going to go over that whole thing next week. We're going to have Chad, Craig's son, on, and And who's that? Melissa? She's a
Sweet
singer.
Melissa, yeah.
Sweet Melissa. Yeah, she's supposed to be there too. So we don't want to leave her out. And she'll be on the podcast as well. So I guess we'll go ahead and jump into the interview, right, Craig?
Yeah, let's go on and go get to it.
Are you gonna sing some Happy Trails, or are you gonna let that guy bother
You gonna put that at the end, or I'll just?
Yeah, I'll put it on the end.
All right. Well, anyway, so yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in to podcast 76 of the Stone Roadie. Until next week, it's happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you, and may the good Lord take a liking to you. And that's another wrap. And we're going to go right into Griff Martin on the road with, no, it's not Griff Martin on the road.
It's the interview with Benjamin Scott.
Interview with Benjamin Scott. And that's a wrap.
Yeah. We'll see you guys.
Okay, we finally got hooked up here with Benjamin Scott. We had a little trouble, getting the signal all the way over there to Australia. It went through the ocean instead of through the sky. But we got him. How you doing, Benjamin?
Good, very good.
So we really appreciate you coming on. We have done a little bit of homework on you, and we see on Facebook there's a lot of people slamming you, saying that you're not Bon Scott's son. But just like Craig and I, we just report and a viewer decides. We're not gonna slam you here. We're not gonna do that, but we are gonna ask you some questions and let you get a chance to explain some things. So we'll go ahead and start it off. And what is it that you can give us as some concrete evidence that makes us think that you are Bon Scott's son?
Basically, the famous people that I met. So I've appeared in articles now for about 15 years. And I've mentioned Ozzy Osbourne, Gene Simmons, a multitude of people, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, over this period of time. And none of them have ever come forward and questioned any of the stories. The only people that question the stories are the people who are not connected to the band officially.
Okay, and so I know how that I do know how someone becomes pregnant and becomes, your parent, but how is it that your mother and Bon Scott got together?
Well, I'm probably not really authorised to talk about it, but I believe it was to do with barbecues. They lived in an area where they both went to the pub, so they knew each other, some sort of a social circle. And when Bon met my mum, she was actually a legal widow. Her husband had died of cancer. So yeah, that's sort of basically. I can't really talk for those type of things. My mum was a very particular person. She didn't smoke or drink, and she wasn't into hard rock and roll or anything like that. So how they met is basically through backyard barbecues, social circles, those types of things.
So did your mom tell you that you were Bon Scott's son?
Absolutely. And she also spoke to me about his death, because when he died, we'll go into this later on, but I refused to accept it. I just couldn't, my brain couldn't accept it. And I kept visiting people after he died, asking if he was still there. And eventually my mum took me to the house where I'd last seen him and explained to me what death was, and explained to me that I would never see him again.
Because of so many people are telling you that you're not his son, have you ever thought about getting a DNA test to see.
We've gone through this. So basically in 2008, I presented myself to the Fremantle Herald, and I said to them, how much would you charge me to do a small advert in the paper to ask the Scott family to come forward and do a DNA test? Well, a few days later, the paper rang me and said, look, we're going to put you on the front page. I said, go for it. So that's where the Bon Scott statue is in Australia, in Fremantle, where he grew up and where his parents lived. So they put me on the front page, and a week later, one of his good friends, Graham Buzz Bidstrup, he was a drummer for an Australian rock band called The Angels. He came forward and said, I remember Ben and his mum in a relationship. He said the family, the Scott family, would never agree to a DNA test, and trying to make them do so would open a hornet's nest. Well, that was 2008. And in 2020, the local Fremantle media, they ran another story about me, and again they questioned the Scott family. This has happened probably about 20 times, trying to get the Scott family to come forward to do the DNA test. And on this occasion, the Scott family got their lawyers involved, Sonic lawyers, acting on behalf of the Bon Scott estate. They contacted me and they've contacted the media. What they've said is, we're never going to agree to a DNA test. There's no law that says we must take the DNA test, and we're sick of you putting us in the news asking for it. So I've pushed for that DNA test to the point where their lawyers are threatening, threatening letters. So, so as far as the DNA test goes, my DNA is available, has been for 10 years on Ancestry DNA. And so I get all these links coming up for members of the Scott family going back 200 years. But none of the Scott family, the recent ones, have put their DNA on there. So, yeah, I've really tried to push the DNA, but they just won't agree.
What is it that all these people, why are they after you so much, trying to say that you're not him? I mean,
well,
I
don't actually think there's very many of them. There's basically probably around about 10 people, and they're either associated with the Young family or they're associated with that lady. I won't mention her so we don't get in any trouble, but there's one particular lady who's written a book and tried to claim that she was his soulmate. And basically the people around them are where the problems come from. Actually, Malcolm's son, Ross Young, he rang me probably about 10 years ago and said, look, I'm sick of arguing with these people. I've told them you are Bon's son. And I said to him, I said, look, don't keep arguing with them, they're relentless, they're trolls, they're bots, they never offer any evidence, they never say, 99% of the people I come across have no problem with me at all.
And the people that you mentioned earlier, like Arnold Schwarzenegger and those other people that you mentioned, what was it? How were you in touch with them, and that they were collaborating with you on the topic?
Yeah. Okay. So do you want to touch on my dad's death now, or do you want to? So I'll explain.
That's totally fine. If you need to talk about that in order to answer the question, that's great. Yeah.
Well, it'll make sense later then. So
okay,
what we'll talk about, is George Young. He was the elder brother of Angus and Malcolm. George Young and my dad, they met at a battle of the bands in, I think it was Adelaide, in about 1970 or 71. And George Young awarded. So George and my dad became friends from about 1970. Well, in 1979, George Young had a party in his backyard. And I was actually staying with my dad at his unit in St Kilda. And we got a phone call, and me and my dad went to this party at George Young's house. Now, at this party, there was a list of people. I don't know. George Young was the boss of AC/DC. He was the one with the black book. He was the one who knew all the people. And so there was a lot of famous people at this party. And I was only, was I 6 or 7 years old? And I was talking with this blonde lady, and there was a drunk guy, and he kept trying to talk to this young blonde girl, and she didn't want to talk to him. And at some point, I managed to knock the table, and it spilled his drink, and he went really angry at me, called me a whole lot of nasty names. And she said, listen, you don't talk to children like that. He got angry at her, and he grabbed her by the hair, started to punch her. And so my dad come rushing in. All the people come from outside, inside this house, came rushing out and grabbed this guy and give him a bit of a touch up. And at that stage, I still didn't know who she was. So I just froze, got scared. Anyway, that was before my dad's death. So after my dad died, I used to go swimming in a place called Chelsea. And by chance, she actually married and moved into a house in Chelsea. And as I walked past one day, she seen me come over and said, Ben, how are you? Anyway, from there, whenever I went to the beach, she would invite me to come inside, have a cool drink. And then on one particular day, she said, look, my brother's coming to Australia to visit me and he'd like to meet you. Okay. So, but she said, to keep it quiet for security reasons. At that point, I still didn't really know who Arnold Schwarzenegger was. I was too young, So on the Saturday, it was a Saturday night party. I went to their house, and as I was walking to the house, Arnold Schwarzenegger was standing on the balcony outside this house, and he looked like Hercules, And I refused to go in. There was no way known I was going in. So I took off, never even went to the party. And anyway, a few days later, she came out, I was walking past, and she came out and said, do you want to come inside for a drink? At that point, Arnold was inside, and so I didn't know he was in there, so I went inside, sat down, and he came and introduced himself. And the particular part that when I spoke with him, he told me about the Scott family, and he told me that they argued with the band in 1980 because they refused to accept that Bond had any children. They wanted control of the money, and there was nothing that would change their mind, even arguing with people. But what particularly concerned Arnold was my dad's death, because evidently this guy that was at the party, he was really angry about what happened to him, even though he was the one who punched the lady and he got punched. And it did worry Arnold that he thought it was possible my dad's death was connected to this guy, because evidently this guy was a bit of a cocaine sort of a dealer or something, pretty heavy guy. And so he spoke to the young brothers about it, because it actually concerned him that his half sister might be in danger. So that's how it was. That's how I met him. It was actually through a backyard barbecue, and a few incidents took place at the backyard barbecue. And then, so from there I met him in 1983 is when I met Arnold Schwarzenegger.
So then how much time passed by that your father died after the incident at the party?
Okay, the incident at the party happened before he died?
Yeah, how much longer after the incident at the party did he die?
I always struggle. So I can recall events and incidents like that, but I really have trouble grasping years and time. I couldn't give you an exact answer to that. Whether it was 1 month, 6 months, I don't have anything I can grasp to give you that time frame. Do you understand?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
So you, of course, you were too young to remember, but you know when the time frame of the party was, and you know when your father died. So I mean, you figure that out.
Well, I think we probably should touch now on the death itself.
Okay, go ahead.
I was only 6 years old, so to me there was no Monday to Friday. I wasn't even going to school at that point, you know. So one day was no different to the next, and so when I look back at the memories, yeah, it's very difficult for me to grasp 1 week or 1 month because I was just too young to be paying attention. But in 2008, when that Buzz Bidstrip came forward and said he remembers my mum and Bon in a relationship, his story is the paper, the Fremantle paper, they printed a story saying Buzz was one of the last people to see my dad alive. Okay, so that's true. So this whole story about the London alcohol, that's bullshit. The Fink created heroin overdose, that's bullshit. The bottom line is Bon was murdered. That's the truth of the story. And the band itself, right, they were so scared that the fans would revolt against the band. The family and the band agreed that they would keep that out of the public arena. So quite rightfully, the Fremantle Herald printed that Buzz Bidstrip was one of the last people to see Bon alive, and that's true because he came to my house with Bon and was smoking joints out the back of my house, and this was like less than a week before my dad died.
So what can you tell me about this Dave Stevens that is supposedly another guy?
Well, yeah. Well, the interesting part with him is that I was in the media from about 2008 to 10, and I was all over the media. I had probably if you just Google my name, I was the son of Bon everywhere all over the world. And no one questioned it. No one came forward and said, no, he isn't. You know, they even put me on Entertainment Tonight saying Bon Scott's son wants to be a movie star and star in his dad's documentary, all this sort of stuff. And no one came forward. No one said a word. Probably about 2000 and maybe about 13 or something, it all started, you know. These people, Dave Stevens, Mary Renshaw, that's when it all started because I guess they looked at it and thought we could make money from that. You know, I'm not a singer, I'm not in a band. I'm not going to go to no big festival and sing and make money out of it or anything, you know. But that's where they came in, you know. So the people I know tell me, and I've got a couple of sisters who don't want to know any of these people, but we don't believe him at all. People have asked him to provide his DNA, even to put it on Ancestry DNA. He's refused to do it. So, I mean, there's only so much. I mean, he says, oh, my mum told me. I mean, if you haven't met the band, I don't believe a word he says. That's the truth of the matter.
Was it you that was on Entertainment Tonight, or was it Dave Stevens?
Me.
You were on Entertainment Tonight?
Yeah.
So I guess that's available. We could probably find that and take a look at it, right?
You probably could. But that was in about 2010, so it's a good long. I don't know if they keep them, but it was about 2010 when that happened. You can actually still Google it. You can actually still Google it. The headline was, son of Bon Scott wants to be a movie star.
Oh, what's interesting here is it's not like a story like you would tell your teacher that, you know, the dog ate my homework. You know, you've got like Arnold Schwarzenegger looped in here. And
absolutely. You know who else I've got?
If you were alive, you know, I don't know how you would pull the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing in there, but like I said, you know, there's people out there that, you know, that do want to discredit anybody for if there was somebody who tried to say they were Ronnie Van Zant's son, I'm sure they'd have the same problem you're having. So
Yeah.
who is anybody to really say? I mean, unless the only way is like Craig and I said is DNA. DNA doesn't lie, and it,
Well,
hopefully you can one day be able to do that.
yeah. You must remember that I actually met Derek, that's Bond's brother, in 1980. And he told me that he would get the money because they were arguing with the band about the money, and that he would cut me out. That's what he said to me, and I will give you some of it, not all of it. He also told me not to hang around Mary, I better say her name, but anyway, not to hang around Mary Renshaw. So the thing is, for them, they know what the outcome of the DNA test is going to be. If they thought for 1 minute that I would be found not positive as a relation, they'd come forward. They'd get rid of me. You've got to remember that. That's the part that nobody really wants to talk about. If these people.
What is your main reason for wanting to find out for sure? Well, for wanting you to be able to tell people that. What's your main reason?
When I first came forward in 2008, I really wasn't expecting any sort of euphoric event. I didn't really consider it to be such a big deal, So right. When I did it, and I ended up being on the news and all that. Even then, I never pushed it. I never tried to get lawyers. I never tried to go and force people to agree or anything. I just sort of took everything in my stride and went about my normal day-to-day routine. But with that introduction of people slandering me, coming forward and saying, it's not true, it started to create big problems in my personal life, So from there, I then started to push it a bit. And I mean, I've had text messages from people saying, if you don't stop being in the news as Bon Scott's son, we're going to hurt your children, So things sort of went a bit haywire, So now I've actually tried to push the issue so that people understand that it is true, So that's my main objective. And sure enough as well, I say I want my money. Arnold Schwarzenegger said to me, maybe one day I'll be able to help you get your money. And I've tried to contact him and he hasn't contacted me. But so that's the other point why what I'm interested in is where did my money go?
His brother still alive or is he dead?
Beg your pardon?
Is Bond's brother still alive?
Yeah, he recently did the interview where he said he was sick of all the lies and it hurt his mother, and that he's pretty angry about all the lies. And I know what he's talking about. He's talking about people like Mary and Fink and all these people who have now made themselves some sort of an object of Bond's life, and they're coming up with all this bullshit, and none of it's true, And so Derek's still alive, and he will see this. And Derek, here's your chance, mate. Here's your chance to come forward and put all the bullshit in the bin where it belongs.
Does he believe that Bond was murdered as well? Does he believe that too?
He'd have to. He would absolutely. He came to Mordialloc. He argued with the Young brothers. He would have to. Personally, I have no idea. But what I will say is that he came to Mordialloc. He spoke with the Young brothers, so he must be aware. Absolutely, he couldn't. Unless they lied to him, which I don't believe is true. One of the things that I do remember from back then was Malcolm Young. Malcolm Young said that him and his brother were really nervous when they were going to meet the Scott family because of the way my dad died. Anyway, he said what him and the brothers found really peculiar was that the family really wasn't that interested in his death. They were more interested in getting control of the money and how much money that they were entitled to, you know, which, I mean, sort of explains things to me because Angus Young said to me, I told Derek, the money goes through you or it goes through nobody. So I don't know if you know some of the story, but this went on for quite some time. But in 1982, the company Sevdoka was registered, so 2 years after my dad died, and that's the company which the Bond Scott estate gets its royalties or whatever it gets from.
Do you still have contact with the band members today?
No, I've tried to contact these people. You know, they've gone from, they're so rich now, I don't think they particularly care. Another one's Phil Rudd, because Phil Rudd, you know, I maintained in contact with Phil Rudd up until about close to 1990. But you got to remember, Phil, he got fired in '83. And then he bought land in Patterson Lakes. So I met his sister in 1990, and she took me to a house in Patterson Lakes, showed me the houses that he owned and built. He's got a little sort of subdivision there where he owns all the houses. So he's another one. Phil, if you're reading this, there's no excuse, mate. You know, you can come forward now and tell these people the real story or the real truth about, you know, me as a child, because there was no question, you know.
Okay, well, as far as proving, you know, that you're his son and everything, you know, we could probably go over that all day. So you've already, I think, you know, you gave a good, I think, analogy of what you think the reasons are why you're his son. So what you have, like some stories about AC/DC and things like that. What can you share with us, with the viewers? Some of the things you were telling me that you were going to share with us.
Yeah, I guess we'll start with the day my dad turned up with Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne and my dad, they weren't just friends in music, they were friends outside of music. And if you ask me who the single biggest influence on my dad's music, that's Ozzy. Ozzy was the one who, you know, was his friend. And so he turned up with Ozzy Osbourne and he brought one of them ride-on toy electric cars for a present. That's my dad. And back then, you could earn about $250 a week and it was worth $600. And so at the front of my joint, I tried to drive this toy electric car and I drove it over the edge of the roadway and snapped the steering wheel off. And Ozzy Osbourne was the funniest thing he'd seen for a long time. He just thought it was hilarious. And my dad was looking at it, thinking about his $600. So yeah, we then jumped in the car. We went around to a place called EMI Music. And back in those days, it was the only vinyl reproducing company in the Southern Hemisphere. So we went there. I don't know what album it was. I was too young to pay attention, but Ozzy Osbourne held me up and let me slide this hard disc or something it was, like a big cassette, into this strong box so that they could copy it and reproduce it and make vinyl albums to be sold inside Australia. Then we left and we went down to Mordiallic shops and we went and visited a few people, other people that went on to become famous bands. The Finn brothers, they had a little shop in Mordiallic. That sort of ended that day. And then the following day, I was down near the railway station and Ozzy Osbourne and my dad hopped off a train. And as they hopped off this train, Ozzy Osbourne had lost his shirt, he had a black eye, he had blood all over him, and I looked in the train and there was about 10 blokes all flat out on the ground. And back then in Australia, we had what's called street gangs, and all these, you could be just sitting on a train by yourself, and 10 guys would jump on this train and beat you up for nothing. And that's what happened to Ozzy and my dad. And unfortunately for this street gang, they run into a couple of guys that didn't mind a bit of a Barney here and there, and they run over the top of them. But then, yeah, we left there. We went around. We walked past FIFA Riccobono's shop. Now, FIFA Riccobono, she was the one-time CEO of Albert Music, and they were the ones who did the first few albums in Australia. Well, as we walked past her shop, she ignored my dad, didn't say one word to him, and then she tried to say hello to Ozzy Osbourne. Well, Ozzy Osbourne said, you know, he told her all about it. He called her a whole lot of nasty names, and he said, "You cost us millions, you effing B." I won't swear, you know, I won't, you know, we'll keep it nice, but Ozzy didn't like her for some reason. He blamed her for the end of the tour when AC/DC and Black Sabbath, the tour got cancelled in '77. Well, evidently this FIFA Riccobono had something to do with it, and Ozzy didn't, you know, wasn't at all impressed. But yeah, so that was sort of one of the stories. Ozzy Osbourne.
Have you been in touch with Ozzy and kind of rekindled that story at all with him?
I've tried. I've actually sent messages to Jack Kelly. I've had people over there actually do the same and try. I think the label might have them forbidden. You know, you probably got to, before you can do anything, the label, the one who pays you your money, has to be given permission. They probably aren't allowed to, you know. The other thing is, before my dad died, now he gave me 10 grand. So if we went into Bon Scott's banking records for 1980, you're going to see he opened a bank account, took 10 grand out of his account, and put it into an account for me. That's a legal thing that can be never taken away. So Derek, you know, if you want to go through those records, mate, have a look. You'll find the $10,000 payment. But we'll continue on. On the same day that my dad opened that bank account and put the 10 grand in, he got me to write Ozzy Osbourne's address on a mail package. Now, this was a big package. It wasn't just a letter. It was a big, thick box type package. And so, and back then, my dad had been paying someone to teach me how to read and write. So I couldn't write that good. I remember I read it, and he said, "Very good," but it was all scribbly because I couldn't write properly. Anyway, there used to be a video online where Ozzy Osbourne talks about this mail package that arrived at his house after my dad died. And his words were on this online interview that it blew him out. You know, he wasn't expecting it, you know, and the mailman came, and there's this mail package. So, again, Jack or Kelly Osbourne, if you guys can let us at least see the package, let us know what was in it. But the package arrived after my dad died.
Okay, there's another story that you were telling me, something that had to do with the plane and AC/DC being on the plane.
So there used to be a lot of interviews and things online, and nobody really was paying a lot of attention. So this would have been in the mid-90s. And there was an interview of this guy. Now, I don't even recall who he was, but what he said was, his accusation was that Mark Evans, the bassist for AC/DC, got fired because he told someone in Australia about the band having visa problems. That was what his side of the story was, and his side of the story was that that Lynyrd Skynyrd, Black Sabbath, and AC/DC were going to tour together, and so that at some point they applied for a visa while they were touring with Black Sabbath. That's AC/DC to enter the USA, and that visa problems occurred. And I think the part I do believe is that everybody, including Mark Evans, assumed without direct information, but assumed it was because of my dad's criminal record. And evidently, at the time, it wasn't just my dad that got refused. Angus did as well, because he had a charge for theft at the time. So the story is, had they been given visas when they applied for them, they probably would have been on that flight with Skynyrd. And I actually believe this. I don't question that guy's story for 1 minute. I absolutely believe it. I think it's that the bands and that itself don't want to talk about these visa problems. You know, they want to sell albums. They want to talk about criminal records.
Greg, what do you think about that story? You're the guy who can comment on that. He says that it's a good possibility that AC/DC would have been on the Survivor tour on the plane. Is that a possibility in your mind?
On the plane that we crashed on?
Yeah.
No, there wasn't enough room on that plane. There was 26 people on that plane as it was. It was pretty full. There wouldn't have been enough room for any more passengers on that plane.
Yeah, excuse me, that plane was a big plane, but it wasn't big enough to hold two bands by any means.
No.
Yeah, I guess
the crew would have, if that would have happened, all the crew would have had to have traveled on an alternative method. And that would have
that was my first thought. Had AC/DC landed, maybe that crash wouldn't have happened. You know, that's another way to look at it.
I did see an interview with Bon Scott, and he was talking about touring, and I think it was in '77, and he mentioned the band UFO, and he was talking to the guy interviewing, and he was asking, did he know the bass player in that band, or maybe it was another band, but I think they did tour in the United States around that time frame. But that's something you can find out.
There's lots of conjecture. I've studied it very extensively. I mean, what the labels have done, they've gone about, they want to increase sales, you know. So without giving specific exact information, they've released all these types of articles, you know, and people who are really fans will then rush out and try and buy that particular album or tour, you know, bootleg or whatever, you know. So I do question the stories out there about the traveling through America. You go on one website and it says they're in Europe, and you go into another one that says they're touring USA, and then you go onto another one that says they were in London. You know, they're in an awful lot of places in an awful short time. So perhaps they did it. Perhaps, you know, I don't know. But like I said, I was a bit too young to be paying attention, and I just know that that my dad had told people that his criminal record was going to cost him his job in the band. You know, he had an extensive criminal record, and if you know what he'd been charged with during his life, I'd question whether America would let anyone in with that sort of criminal record, you know. So,
well, I can tell you that I don't know if you know Joe Crimp. Joe Crimp was Leon Wilkerson's roommate at the time that the plane crashed, and after the plane crash, they were still roommates for some time. And he told me that, and I don't think I don't remember who all in the band stayed there at the house with Leon and Joe. This is after your father died. So they were trying to recruit Leon as a bass player. And according to Joe, he asked Leon to check his contract, and Leon is actually considering becoming, the bass player, but his contract wouldn't let him out. So now the belt buckle, and Joe I think he seems to think that that's when that happened, that he got the belt buckle. But you tell a story where your father, Bon Scott, your father, and Ronnie disappeared for some time. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, so this, I don't know the exact years, but like I said, for many years, there was a lot of interviews by Angus and Malcolm Young on YouTube. And not just YouTube, but just websites where you could click and they would talk about so many different issues, and one of them was that they didn't give much detail. When I watched it, I was more looking for things about my dad's death. When I was going through all these, I wasn't really looking at the belt buckle. Didn't really interest me, but they gave a story that there was some party in the Bahamas or something like that, and all these bands went there. It was like a big party, and they said something like that. Ronnie and my dad and the boss of the label as well, or something like that. They disappeared, and a couple of days later, my dad reappeared wearing this belt buckle. Now, I don't know what to believe. Your story sounds as good to believe as well. The reason I sort of have a bit of a favoritism to your version is that Mark Evans, back in 1980, he did an interview and said something about plans for them, Bon and Mark Evans, to go and join Lynyrd Skynyrd somewhere. So, I don't know. But the other thing is, I get a lot of people that knew Bon, and there was a definite friendship between Bon and Ronnie, my dad and Ronnie. So
I don't know. Talking to Joe, if that belt buckle. I mean, my point was, I think that was after the crash, so that's why I think maybe Joe thinks that it didn't happen that way. I'd have to get with Joe on that, but this is a good time to bring Craig in. Craig, do you remember any time in the Bahamas that Ronnie?
No. To my knowledge, Ronnie was never in the Bahamas, but Ronnie and Bon did have a closeness, because, like I said, when I was out with Journey, we toured with AC/DC, and Bon found out that I was with Skynyrd, and he wanted to know if I could outdrink Ronnie, and I said, well, that we were drinking buddies. So me and your dad actually did spend a few hours drinking some. Unfortunately, I don't remember much about that night. But we had a little conversation and a couple of tours different places.
What about the tour that Skynyrd did in '76 in Glasgow? I believe there was 5 shows, and AC/DC were in the same area doing I think it was the Lock Up Your Daughters tour. When Skynyrd, I've only read about it, but evidently Skynyrd did 5 shows in Glasgow in 1976, I believe.
Yeah, we did a bunch of shows in Glasgow. Yeah, I remember Glasgow very well. The Apollo Theater in Glasgow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's probably
Is it possible he could have taken off with Bon Scott for some period of time, Craig? Glasgow? That's possible. They could have took off for a couple, 2 or 3 days. Yeah. Yeah. So your story could be true then, Benjamin. So
Well, it's not mine. It's just a story that I've
heard.
read.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's just your opinion of how he may have gotten the belt buckle. That was just.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's true. Oh, I think it's true. I think, yeah.
I would tend to think that most likely it would have been Ronnie giving Bon Scott the belt buckle, probably. I think. Don't you, Craig? Don't you think the way that he got the belt buckle was probably from Ronnie?
I think Ronnie had a few of those. Yeah, I don't know where. There were a few of them on the plane. There was even a couple of brand new ones on the plane. I got a couple of them out of that stuff. And yeah, Jeff's got one of them here. I had one I was going to sell, and Jeff bought it off of me.
Is that an original? Right, that's an original right there. Yeah.
That's one off the plane.
Yeah, there you go, Benjamin. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. I've actually someone, I think
you can tell that one. This was brand new when it was on the plane, and you can tell it's still like brand new. Jeff doesn't wear it very often, or automotive, I should say.
Someone, I think it might have been Matt from the Southern Skynyrd group on Facebook. They put the feelers out, and they were trying to get me one of them belt buckles, and I said, "Oh, look, don't worry." And someone from Geelong here in Australia has sent me a message, and he reckons he's got one, an original one, and he's going to dig it out. He said it's going to take him 3 weeks, but he's going to dig it out. And he's going to message me. So I might have an original one coming forward soon. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, that'd be cool. You bring it on here and show it to us.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So do you have any other stories you want to share? Anything else you got? Anything you want to say?
I guess we probably should touch on the death. I think most people. We'll start again from Buzz Bigstrip. So that Buzz Bigstrip, he turned up just like Ozzy did and Gene Simmons. Turned up at my house with my dad. More often than not, when they did come to my house, it was because one of my neighbours sold weed. So if they were ever coming to go and buy weed, they virtually had to walk past my house anyway. And so one day he showed up with Graham, which is Buzz Bigstrip, and we're in the backyard. And my dad was telling me that he was going overseas, and I said to him, where's overseas? What's overseas? And he said, it's really far over the water, and I said, I can swim there. And so that was the conversation we were having, and they were both blowing joints. And my older brother, half brother, he came out the backyard. He smelled the marijuana and ran inside and told Mum. And so my mum went out the kitchen window and started yelling and screaming, saying they had to leave, So pretty hastily, Graham, Buzz Bigstrip, and my dad took off down the side of the house with me in tears. But say after that, the following morning, when I went to go to school, my dad was waiting for me, which was good, because otherwise it would have been that joint blowing session would have been the last time I seen him alive, because he didn't live long afterwards. But anyway, he walked me to school. And when we got to school, he introduced me to some friends who were also in the primary school. I won't mention their name, but a lot of I'll mention their surname. It's the Dunn family, and they lived about 100 metres from the school, and their daughter and I were in the same age bracket. So introduced me. I met her, and we became friends, and we started, kissing behind the school shed and all those sort of things that young kids do. Probably somewhere around a week is about as good a guess as I can remember. That young girl didn't come to school anymore, and I think I waited 2 or 3 days, and she still hadn't still hadn't come to school. So I broke the rules. I left school early one morning and I walked 100 metres to a house. And as I got close to the house, I could see my dad's car in the driveway with the passenger door open, wide open. The first thing I did was walk to the car and look in it. There was no one in it. So I then had to walk back along this roadway to enter the gated entrance. And when I entered the gated entrance, I see my dad on the ground, difficult to explain, covered in ants, injured, bent over, twisted, and I froze, absolutely froze. Didn't cry, just didn't know what to do. Just stood there for about 30 seconds, absolutely frozen. I then turned around, I walked halfway back to school and started to cry, started to realise what I'd seen, so I walked back again. So then I walked back and I had a second look and still there was no one there. Then I got scared and I started walking back to school. I got about halfway back to school and my school teacher, because I disappeared, had come looking for me. So I told my school teacher what I'd seen. She told me to wait here. She went down and, they called the cops or whatever. So this was actually at the Dunn family house. So a lot of people over many years have heard these stories about how he died. I'm telling you what I see. This is not something else. This isn't something, an internet story or anything like that. This is the fact. And so I still, when it was in shock, I still couldn't believe it. That's why I kept going to all the record shops in the area asking for him, even though I'd seen him. I just couldn't accept it. But to further the story is Angus Young. I seen Angus Young a few days after his death, and I'd actually seen FIFA Riccobona. I mentioned her earlier. I'd seen her threaten my dad. He took me to go and get one of these single albums. Back then, there were these single albums you could get, all the kids' names on them. So there was Ben, Alan, John, Jack, James, all in alphabetical order, and you could buy one. And it was a song that you play it or sing about your name. Well, I wanted one, and my dad took me to FIFA's shop, FIFA Riccobona's shop, where she had all these records, to give me one, and she refused. She absolutely refused. She said, "Oh, I'm not giving it." My dad said to her, "I own these albums. I paid for them with my money." And so they had a massive argument. She kept saying something like, "You're going to regret that. You're going to regret that." So when I seen Angus after his death, I said to him, "You know that FIFA Riccobona?" I told him the story. He said, "Look," he said, "I know." He said, "I tried to fire her. I've tried to fire her, but I can't because her family owned the albums. The manufacturing company, EMI, well, her family or whatever owned that or had some sort of involvement." So over the years, then I add to that what Arnold Schwarzenegger told me as well about how he feared that guy my dad punched at the party might have had something to do with it. When you see all these little bits of evidence, now, fair enough for you guys who know nothing about it, it's a little bit hard to believe. But for a lot of people in Australia and who knew Bond and who were around at the time, back then, this will be of no surprise to them. None. Even for Derek, the family, this will be no surprise. You've got to remember, they wanted to maintain album sales. That's the reason why the initial cause of death was kept quiet. So yeah, I don't know. That's the truth of the matter. Whether you believe it, I don't really care. I know a lot of people do, and so there it is.
Did he have a funeral, Bon Scott?
Well, like what I remember was the arguments between the Scott family and Angus Young was so fierce that the Scott family refused to let the band go to the funeral. That's what I believe. Now, further to that, in 1980, I think it was about 5, after Phil Rudd had been fired, he did an interview where he said one of the things he has always regretted was not being able to go to the funeral. That's what Phil Rudd said. Now, I personally was too little to know, but now you will bring that Mary Renshaw back in. She says she went to the funeral. She says her and Phil Rudd went fishing afterwards. Yet I just find all this very peculiar that there's not one photo of this funeral. Nothing. Nothing. How could that be? How could one of the biggest singers in the world die in suspicious circumstances, and then they have this funeral where the band goes and no one takes a photo?
Where is he buried? Where is he buried?
They say he was cremated here where I am now in Fremantle. And when I first visited the gravesite, that was in 97 or 2000, in between there was no actual site. There was only a little plaque on the wall in the middle of the cemetery, so he was cremated, not buried. And then so many people visited the cemetery over those years that they moved his plaque to outside, closer to the gate, so that when the fans come, they didn't walk through the middle of the cemetery. You can now walk around the edge and not disturb people who are burying or saying goodbye.
Very similar story to Ronnie, and why Judy probably moved his body, because he was right up front, and I heard that she didn't like that, and that's why, which understandably so. Well, it's a great story. I've never heard anything like this. Did you explain this on Entertainment Tonight, the same thing, or what did they talk to you about on Entertainment? What did they talk to you about on Entertainment Tonight?
Oh no, they didn't even. A lot of times with the media, they don't even contact you. So what happened was Undercover Music News in Australia, they ran a story that a documentary on my dad's life was going to be made, and so I sent him an email in a joking manner, jesting, and said, "Oh, I wouldn't mind throwing my hat into the ring to be involved in this, right?" Well, he also in jest ran a story on his website and said, "The son of Bond wants to be a movie star." Well, wow, it just went super viral. And I mean, every single media place in every language ran the story, including Entertainment Tonight. Son of Bond wants to be a movie star. So I never even spoke to them. I walked into a shopping centre in the big city of Melbourne. I look up and there's a massive TV screen in the corner there, like a really huge one. And there's a picture of me, and they were saying, "Son of Bond, Scott." So I had a quick look around. I got a bit paranoid, and I took off. But yeah, so that ain't. A lot of times the media don't actually don't need to talk to you when they run a story.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you didn't really, you weren't able to talk and tell anything about it.
No, it's just son of one Scott wants to be a movie, so that's what I want to do.
Well, is there anything else that you want to say that you have?
I guess, yeah, for people that understand the situation and know the people, we'll talk about the Bon Scott statue in Fremantle. Now, the Bon Scott statue in Fremantle, the person who came up with the idea to make that statue, his name's Doug Thorncroft. Now, me and Doug Thorncroft grew up together, or hung around together in Mordialloc, in that same suburb that I've mentioned in this interview many times. And to thicken the pot, so to speak, FIFA Ricobono, after my dad's death, FIFA Ricobono bought the Thorncroft family home in Mordialloc, and then the Thorncroft family moved over here to Western Australia, and then Doug Thorncroft came up with that statue idea. So a lot of people are going to watch this video, and a lot of people may not believe it, but there's going to be a whole lot more that know what I'm telling people is the truth. And all these little bits of evidence, like Doug Thorncroft and that, just support the story that I've told.
Well, yeah, it's like anything else. No matter what you do, there's people that get pissed off and people that don't, people that believe you and people that won't. So, but we do know. Craig said that that's a very big possibility that your dad and Ronnie could have disappeared a couple of days ago. That might have been how he got the belt buckle. That's a possibility right there.
I think there's more to the story. I think in 1976, when they were all around Glasgow, I think you throw Ozzy Osbourne in there as well. They've come up with a plan to create their own label, so to speak. Because at the time, you could be in a band, you could tour every night of the week, and at the end of that, you weren't getting paid much. The label, the businessman, he was the one who got the money, and then he gave it out. And so I think the plan was to create their own one, where when they held a concert, everyone got the money, not the label. So, and I think that's that's what I believe. There was some sort of a deal there, where the bands would link together and create like a super group of bands and tour the world, make all this money, Anyway, that's
you would be surprised that there's people that love Lynyrd Skynyrd so much, they'll take this story and they'll dissect it and they'll go through it and they'll figure out times and dates and things like that, and we'll hear from them. So, it could be an advantage for you. It could be a disadvantage. But Craig, what do you remember about anything else that you remember about Bon Scott other than when you guys were sharing the drink?
No. Skynyrd, we did a tour with AC/DC over in Europe. And then when I went over there with Journey, AC/DC headlined over Journey over there, and then when we came back to the United States, it was the opposite. So Journey headlined over AC/DC, and that's when Bon and I got together. But I don't remember much about it besides that. Yeah.
Well, Craig, you got anything you want to ask Benjamin? Any questions?
No. It's been nice having you on, Benjamin, and hope people enjoy your story. Griff went out to the airplane crash site here last week. I think he's going to add this to the end of this podcast. We're probably going to this will probably end up to be close to a couple hours long when we get done with it. So we'll go ahead and put this up. I appreciate you coming on there, Benjamin. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Something I think we should add to all the people that read this, listening. We didn't plan any of this. This was not corroborated beforehand. Just
to clarify that, Benjamin, let me clarify that. There's a fella, and I'm not going to mention his name. I don't think he would mind, but he's the one who told me that, and I think he runs a fan site, and he told me that you were in his fan site, and I said, well, I'd like to get him on. So it was not you. It was not you trying to get on. It was me. It was me getting you on. So that's true.
Yeah. Well, what normally happens after I get involved in one of these interviews, Mary and her troop of trolls, they come forward and say, he forced it, he threatened them, he this, he that.
We'll clarify that right now, that you had nothing to do with trying to get onto the podcast. I brought you on here.
Yeah, and I guess my final thing to all of you people, especially Derek, here's your chance, mate. if you want to end the Son of Bon Scott saga, if you want to end all those lies that Jesse Fink's writing in his book, come forward, we'll sort this out, and it'll all go away, including Fink.
Okay, all right, Benjamin. Is anything else you want to say, or are you good?
I think I've sort of got it a bit scattered, but I've said it, and I'd probably get better at saying it with practice. But yeah, I've said it. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And yeah, and there it is.
You know, right? Yeah, Lynyrd Skynyrd. That's a good one. All right, Craig. Looks like that we had a good interview here with Benjamin, and we appreciate you coming on, Benjamin, telling your story. Sorry, you know, that you have to deal with all these things, and for the people that are on your ass, I mean, you know, we report, you decide. We'll let the
I guess a very notable point is, despite Mary and her friends doing this trolling for 20 years, not one media group during the whole time I've been in the media has ever printed one word she says. And I think that's very notable. So they've been contacting people for 20 years, and none of the media, I get them, the media will contact me and say, wow, this lady, you know, she's like right out there. But they will never print anything she says. That's because none of it's true. That's the fact.
Well, as a follow-up, if there's anybody that has anything that can prove or disprove, you know, get in touch with me. You can go to supportsurvivors.net. That's the page that I run. There's a contact page on there. Send me an email. I'll be happy to read it, and we can decide whether or not we want to move forward with any more information. But thank you for coming on, Benjamin. We wish you luck, and if there's anything we can do for you, let us know.
Thank you very much.
And Craig,
Phil Rudd, call me, Phil. Phil Rudd, call me.
Okay. We don't know how many people watch this, but there's quite a few people.
I don't see it. I promise.
Quite a few
They're
people that
all
won't admit it.
Every single one of them is going to watch this. Every one of them. The lawyers, hello, Damien, Mr. Lawyer. They're all going to have a look. I think Rossi Young, hello, mate.
Yeah, Craig talks about fat folk and cigarette smokers too. So if you're fat and like to smoke, he might poke a little fun at you. Yeah, Craig likes to tell it like it is, so it's something that you wanna know. If the feelings get hurt real easy, you better not watch the show. If your feelings get hurt real easy, you better not watch the show. Happy trail.